Are you tired of brands marketing at you like you're a computer, not a human? We believe there's more to this business than worshiping at the feet of the algorithm. We're three marketers, Matt Banker, Paige Worthy, and David Hepburn. Marketing can be empathetic, ethical, and effective, all at once. I am a fighter! This is Hello First Name, a marketing podcast for thinking, feeling humans.
All right, we are here with Hello First Name yet again, the podcast for thinking and feeling humans. We do this thing live, which means people are welcome to join us in the room. I am excited. I hope some people are joining us today because I do think we have a good, interesting topic, which is about accessibility. You can find us on YouTube. We've got recordings. You can subscribe to email updates, and hellofirstnamepod.com is where you'll find us on the web. So today, like I said, we're going to talk about accessibility. David's going to deep dive into that for us, but I think we all have some thoughts and comments on it. My name is Matt Banker. I'm in marketing. I do a lot of marketing with accounting firms. And yeah, that's me. Paige, what about you?
I'm Paige Worthy. I'm a StoryBrand certified guide and marketing strategist and copywriter. I call myself a radically empathetic marketing consultant, and I work with businesses that give a shit to create marketing that is grounded in empathy by humans for humans.
And I'm David. I'm also a StoryBrand certified guide. I co-own Hepburn Creative Inc. in San Diego, California. We're a video production company that works with businesses and nonprofits all around the world to create videos that aren't just placeholders for you as a business or a nonprofit, but that actually move your audience to take that action that you want them to take.
And David, you were just in Central America, right?
I was. That's true. We were just in Guatemala last week with a nonprofit.
That's exciting.
Yeah,
we'll have to hear more about that. Maybe you won't be able to stop thinking about that in the end. You can tell us a little bit about it.
Well, we actually encountered a really cool use case for exactly what we're talking about here.
Amazing.
So I'm definitely going to share some of that here on the podcast today.
Well, so that's a good segue, obviously. We're talking about accessibility, and there's accessibility. There's like a legal definition of accessibility and ADA compliance and things like that. And I'm sure we're going to get into that a little bit. But there's also a bigger picture of what does it mean as marketers to be thinking about a wider audience from an accessibility standpoint. And so maybe David, can you give us kind of an intro? What do you, when you say accessibility, what do you mean? What
Absolutely.
Are you thinking about?
Absolutely. I think a lot of us can be intimidated by the phrase accessibility. And I'm excited for this episode because I am here to tell you that yes, there is a legal side and a compliance side in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different verticals and industries. And even globally, there's different definitions depending on what country you're in, what makes legal compliance when we talk about accessibility. And this podcast is not going to be about that because this is not a legal podcast. This is a podcast for thinking, feeling humans. And so I'm excited. Maybe instead of talking about it as accessibility, let's talk about it as how to be less invisible to your audience. Because the reality is right now, your business and nonprofit is invisible to a lot of people around the world and in a lot of different ways. And I know for me, in our business, we weren't really thinking about that for a long time. And when it was brought up to me that there are these ways that you can be interacting with a broader audience, I was like, oh my gosh, why are we not doing this? Like yes, this requires some extra thought on our end, but the ability that you have as a business and a nonprofit to take some very simple steps to reach a bigger audience, that's what all of us want. That's what marketing is about, right? Growing that audience, the audience that we're trying to reach, we want to reach more of them. That's what marketing is. And so for us to be able to do that right now, there's a lot of ways that we're not. And so when you hopefully on this podcast, we can just talk about some of those ways where maybe you didn't even realize you're alienating some of your audience. And just by implementing some really simple strategies, you can exponentially increase your audience without, buying followers or without doing anything like, oh, we got to come up with better content. Your content right now may be awesome, and it's missing people. And so we're going to talk about today just what some of those ideas are to get you in front of more eyeballs and get you in front of more of the people that want to be engaging with your brand. They just don't know you exist because you're invisible.
David, I wonder if in addition to being less invisible to your audiences, we could also look at this as your audience is feeling more seen by you. And not only getting our content, getting our brands in front of those people, but also pulling them a little bit closer to us just by acknowledging like, hey, we did this for you to make sure that you could access these things that we're creating. And so it's that the two-way street.
Totally. And it's also, you bring up such a great point, and that's absolutely true. On top of that, even, we all live in this, like, we live and breathe this every day at our business or at our nonprofit, and our audience doesn't necessarily in the same way that we do, right? And so we have this curse of knowledge, this curse of familiarity even, of saying, oh, of course everybody knows this because I know this. And the reality is your audience may not.
I think there's a lot of cases where, honestly, as marketers, we're so deep into our own understanding of the world, and we're just not really aware actually of these the reality of other people's lived experience, how they interact with technology, how they interact with marketing. And so we just kind of operate on autopilot and go about doing things in a way that works for us and seems to work for people that are like us. And I feel like a big piece of this accessibility conversation, it's not exact tactical things are important, but a big part of it, I think, is mindset and putting ourselves as marketers into a mindset of understanding that the world doesn't experience, other people in the world don't experience it exactly the same way we do. So, absolutely. David, maybe we could start. What are some areas where, just as a marketer, you do a lot of video, you've kind of grown or recognized area. I'm going to put you on the spot. Like, where have you been weak in the past that you're now at a place of like, this is where we're trying to improve in the future?
Absolutely. So one of the really key ways that marketing with video has gotten better in even really recently has been through the implementation of captions on your video. And captioning has been around for a long time. I mean, I think we can all remember, I mean, at least for me, I remember I can remember sitting in restaurants and like having the TV up in the corner, right, of the room that you're in, and you're watching like those black and white captions scrolling along the bottom that are auto-generated and often terrible. The good news is that technology has improved. Voice recognition has gotten better. And in fact, YouTube and Vimeo and a lot of the video platforms today are now implementing auto-generated captions. So the first thing is, if you're creating videos, you want to be doing captions. And the good news is that your videos may already have an auto-generated version appearing on your video automatically. The downside to me is that because you're depending on an AI to do that for you, or, a computer generated live in the moment, trying to hear what you're saying, that computer is not really listening for context. And so oftentimes, especially, in my experience with the English language, we have a lot of words that sound alike, and captioning can be pretty good at that, but doesn't always get it right. And so when you go to the extra step of creating captions that are generated by a human, those are going to open your audience up to people who either are hearing impaired, who may not hear as well as you do, or, an even bigger thing today is people that don't watch videos with the sound on. You don't even have to be hearing impaired. I'm that way. And I live and breathe in the video world.
And you're a video dude.
I saw a person today had a poll on Twitter. One of the guys that I follow said, when you're watching videos in your feed, are you watching with them mostly with the sound on or mostly muted? And like over 75% of people were saying mostly muted. And so you need to be thinking about your content being in front of people when they can't hear what's happening. And so captions are a really easy way to take that next step. And the cool thing is that not only have the big like video hosting sites like YouTube and Vimeo taken that on as making that available to you, but even places like social media networks where Facebook can do it, Twitter can do it, LinkedIn can
Instagram's
do
doing it
Instagram
on
is
your
doing it now.
Reels.
Yeah, Instagram can even do it automatically
you,
now.
You actually can take those auto-generated captions and make edits to them. Specifically, I saw someone calling out the fact that you can edit out your bleeps that it auto-generates, which is relevant to my interests, even though I don't make Reels. But you can do it with other stuff. Like I've actually seen some like Instagram ads where the auto caption didn't correctly pick up the name of the business that was being advertised.
Right.
And like, y'all, read your captions before they go out. Like, do you want to sell your product or not?
Another great example of that is a URL.
Yes.
Is the URL. And if you're pointing people to the wrong URL, then you got to think about, yes, there's the whole world of, do you need to buy 100 different variations of your business name? But like even your own, anything that you're generated, you should be making sure is correct. And the cool thing too about captions that in terms of expanding your audience that I really want to hit on today too, is one of the things that we started doing that we weren't before is now you have the ability to have your captions translated into other languages around the world and subtitling it. So captions are usually defined as the language that the video is posted in, which in our case, pretty much all the time is English. And then subtitling is translating that from the natural language that's on the video to other languages. And so one thing that we've started doing at Hepburn Creative is for every single video that we create, whether it's for us or for a client, we are commissioning captions in English, and then we're also having that translated into Spanish. Because if you look at the statistics today, and I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but yes, English is a very common language. And again, this comes back to how you're viewing the world in your context. You have to remember that there's hundreds of thousands of millions of other people around the world that are also have access to the internet, but they may not speak your language. And so by translating the content that you're providing into these other languages, it's an incredible opportunity to get your content in front of a whole new audience that a lot of people aren't doing. And it's putting you a step ahead of your competitors if they're not doing it. Right? Because especially if you're putting out valuable content to your audience, and you should be, as you're trying to make that connection with them, and that's one of the really amazing ways that you can use video is by providing valuable tips to your audience that are within the vertical or industry that you're in. If you're translating those into other languages, you're reaching a much broader audience than you are just in the language that is your primary language that you speak.
I just did a little flash Googling and discovered that as of 2015, so probably a lot more now, according to the CIA, Spanish is spoken by 4.85% of the world's population, and its use is even more widespread than English, which is spoken by 4.83%. So I would venture a guess that there are even more people speaking Spanish now.
Right.
And probably a lot of those Spanish-speaking people also speak English because
the language of business, kind of.
Because colonialism. But that's not what we're here to talk
Which
about.
is a topic
today.
for a whole different podcast episode. We'll get there.
I'll probably cover that one. All right, Matt, you were starting to say something.
I was going to ask kind of a technical question, right? So when it comes to captions and text, this might lead us into another conversation.
Yeah.
You have text that is readable by computers,
right?
And that text can be translated and used in other places. And then you have text that is embedded into images and videos. And so
right.
A thing to think about is if you're a video editor, right, you can create a captions or a subtitles file to attach to it.
Right.
And that gets read differently and can be translated in, Google Translate and other things can grab that versus if you are editing and adding those captions like natively to the image files. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or
yeah, absolutely. So as we move along on the continuum timeline of social media growth and technology just in our daily lives, 2, 3, 5 years ago, you did not have the ability to upload that caption file or that subtitling file with your video, whereas now today you have that ability. So I really, depending on the distribution platform, which can vary, most social media networks and YouTube, Vimeo video hosting sites give you the ability to upload that separate file now, and then your viewer can enable that on their end. And so the risk you run by baking it into the video, like if you just put English, like Instagram is a good example, because they used to not provide the auto captioning that they do now, and you used to have to bake that text into your video. And, you know, a use case for when you want to do that, and you have to decide this for your own business and nonprofit, is if you want to keep it brand, like on brand, and like use a specific font or do things in a certain way, that's a use case where baking it in can be valuable, or you want it to appear a certain way. I shy away from that though, because what I think is really empowering for your audience is the ability to select it on their own. And then not, so like if you have your captions baked into a video in English, and then someone wants to enable Spanish captions, well, then they're looking at the Spanish overlaid on top of the English, and that's just makes for, you know, a legibility nightmare, which gets away from the whole idea of accessibility in the first place. Is suddenly you're making it harder for them to engage with your content. So
and even with, you know, using, you know, your brand typeface or something like that, like that may not be suited to overlaying on you know, a dynamic video. So you might be losing people there as well. So you know what, suck it up, get the white text, put it over a black background. Like, now's not the time to make things pretty.
There's a real challenge and balance a lot of times between creative choices and accessibility choices. I think that's a reality that marketers need to be aware of. There's a lot of things that are inaccessible to certain communities or in certain situations. The use of specialty characters for like cool, like meme, you know, you hear like Unicode art in like on Twitter and things, like those are very non-accessible. You know, a screen reader is going to read like / period asterisk. You know, like that can be really obnoxious, but it's cool, right? Like it's creative ways to use technology.
Another great example of that is like on Twitter, when people use like whatever to make their font bold or italicized or whatever, screen readers have a really hard time interpreting that. And so even though, you know, you may look cool with your upside down name, you know, someone who is using a screen reader to engage with your content is going to have a lot harder of a time.
Also, you don't look that cool.
One other thing before we get into that, and that's a great segue into talking about how accessibility, how we can bring that to social media. Before we get away from video, I just want to give one example that we encountered on our trip in Guatemala. So we were there with an organization that is providing a lot of incredible services to children in poverty. And they have a center in the community where these people live all over the country. And I think they work with like 200 plus different communities in Guatemala, and Guatemala is not a very big country. So, and then they work in 27 countries around the world. And so just you extrapolate that out to the thousands of places in these communities that this organization is working. These kids are coming every day or once a week or twice a week to this place to, have access to better education, access to food, access to health checkups, things like that. And so during the pandemic, that all went away because Guatemala as a country really clamped down and everybody locked down. Everybody had to stay home. And so it became this like, oh, okay, how do we pivot what we provide to these kids, because the need is still very much there? How do we continue to provide for these kids during this pandemic when we don't know how long it's going to last? And so what they did is they're like, let's use, even though, poverty is very much a thing in places in Guatemala, technology is embraced differently in other countries. One of the things that often surprises us when we go internationally to countries like Guatemala is you end up having better cell phone service in the most remote places than you do in your own house back at home. And so it's a shock to a lot of people of like, oh my gosh, what? I thought this was a place where poverty was rampant. And it's true, but in countries like Guatemala, they're using technology in really incredible ways to connect with each other in ways that we don't do back here in the United States, or it looks differently than, here in the United States. And so what they did is they said, let's use, parents have cell phones, parents have smartphones. Let's get content to them through video so that they can continue to, be doing exercises and be learning, the different, curriculum type educational things that they were teaching them. And so they were like, cool, how do we do a green screen? And so they went online and found videos available to them on how to go about creating video content. One of the guys that works at one of these, community centers had never done video editing before in his life. And he's like, I'll figure it out. And so he went online and just started learning. And your content can be available to people like that if you're translating out of your main language that you're speaking in the video to another language like Spanish. And so, I doubt that there was a lot of content or maybe that's the wrong way to go about saying it. There could have been more content available to help them learn if more people were creating subtitles for their videos. And so that's just a really powerful way for your content to be reaching a broader audience.
So it's really like if there had been better content available to the folks at this nonprofit on like, how the heck do you create video in Spanish, the language that they use to communicate, then it would have been a lot more simple for them to create this important content during. I love that. I love that.
And the important thing, I think, is not to look back and say, gosh, we could have been doing this better. Like I've been there. Like I look back and it's like, oh geez, why? I can't believe, stupid. Why wasn't I doing this sooner? Get rid of that attitude. Like just start today and be like, man, there are some tools that we can do to better the way that we're engaging with our audience globally. Here are the ways to do it. Let's just go.
Let's talk a little bit about social media and what we need. I think we've talked about maybe 3 categories so far, right? So there's like we'll call it like a legibility category. So screen readers or hearing impairment. The reasons that it's difficult from almost like a physiological sense to like interact with content. Then there's we can maybe talk a little bit about inclusivity in terms of the actual language that we use, and maybe that's and then we talked about like different languages in terms of not everything in English. Right. So let's shift over to talking about social media. Let's start with that like legibility side of things. We talked about special characters and again, this is kind of that trade-off between like what is cool and funny and like a creative way to use a platform. And it is an exciting piece of how technology spurs on different ways of using it. But then you've got this question or this balance of how do you make it accessible? And so one thing that I've seen is meme format, for example, right? Like you've got text embedded into images. What is that? That is not accessible inherently to people. Let's talk about alt tags and like alt text, and then also maybe we can talk about how like in comments or different ways of using the technology itself to make that more accessible for people.
It is relatively new on the social media side. So, for example, on Twitter and Instagram, one of the things that you may have noticed recently is you have the ability to add a description of the image that you're uploading that is separate from the caption or the tweet that you're writing. And so what that is an opportunity for you to just really simply describe the image. Like as you look at that image, you describe what you see on the image. So like, for example, if I uploaded a picture, an image with text of an image advertising this episode of the podcast, and on that image, it's, some sort of background image and then text on it that says, Hello First Name Podcast, episode 3, accessibility and marketing, or how to be less invisible to your audience. Someone who doesn't have the same visual opportunities that you do may not be able to understand that image in the same way. And so it's an opportunity to use an alt description to say background image of blank, text that reads Hello First Name Podcast, episode 3. And so it's literally just a description of what you're seeing.
And I've seen some really interesting before Instagram introduced inline alt tagging. Some more forward-looking and committed to accessibility content creators were posting alt text in their captions, and there's an opportunity there to maybe take things even a step further. Instead of just saying, a woman holds a flower sitting at a cafe table. You could say a dark-skinned fat woman with, curly flowing hair holds, a daisy sitting at an outdoor cafe. And, that brings that idea of inclusivity and really helping to draw people a little bit further into what you're talking about. And I have thoughts on accessibility and language and messaging that we're going to talk about in a little bit, but it's a real opportunity to lean a little bit into the commitment that you've made to language and voice and tone. And it doesn't just have to be cut and dried, because for folks who maybe can't read or, see exactly what's in the image, they deserve to get an experience of it as well.
And if you think about that from a storytelling standpoint, especially as it relates to marketing, if you're telling boring stories, fewer people are going to engage with you as a brand. And so when you take that opportunity, like Paige is talking about, to really lean into painting a descriptive picture with your words, you provide more of an opportunity for even more people to engage in a way that velcros them onto what you're talking about.
One of the things that I think about in this conversation is thinking about accessibility. Again, this is like, hey, brass tacks, we're marketers, we're looking for ROI in a lot of cases. This is a commitment that actually does take time investment to think through these things. But I think an important part of that is to not think about it simply as, oh, this is like a liability issue, or someone's going to get mad at us if we don't provide adequate alt text, or we're going to get called out because such and such, and thinking about it from a mindset of opportunity, right? Like there is actually, you're not doing this just because you're supposed to, or that someone is requiring it, but thinking about it as, part of being an effective marketer is what are those additional steps that you can take to increase the distribution or like accessibility from like effectiveness standpoint. And you're going to get more. I think it's easier, or it's better from when you're thinking about like, why is this worth it? There can be a tendency for us to think, well, I wish I'd love to be more accessible in my marketing, but honestly, I just don't have time to like put in the work. I don't know. I think that's a real balance that people take, or have to. I don't know if they have to, but they often do make those sorts of choices. And again, like going back to that discussion about like creative decisions versus accessibility decisions, there are opportunities sometimes where you can still make the initial creative decision, but there's another way that you can also then make it accessible. One thing I think a lot about for social media is screenshots are a really important thing, especially when we're talking cross-platform, right? Someone screenshots a tweet and posts it on LinkedIn. A screenshot can't be read by a screen reader. And if you're not putting that descriptive text in there, or if you're not putting the text into the comment, you're limiting a certain number of people that can interact with it. And even if you're experiencing, if you're a follower, a way that you could help make some of this stuff more accessible is actually by doing the work of typing out what a screenshot says, or like Paige mentioned, you could write that descriptor of the image or the meme format for someone else. You don't have to be the owner to necessarily do that. So there's ways for you to contribute to accessibility just as a participant, not even just as like the owner or the person doing the marketing.
Right. And the reality today, especially with social media, is it's a content machine, right? And so I think one thing that a lot of us face as we're generating content for our social media platforms is it's so much work to keep it's constantly eating your content. It wants more. It's greedy. And so we have this tendency to be like, ugh, let's just post something. This is an opportunity for you to get intentional with what you're posting, because if you're having to take that extra step to write out and make it more accessible, chances are you're going to be a lot more intentional with what and how you post. And if that's something that you don't want to do, like maybe you're a really small business and it's just you, or it's just you and a couple other people, there are ways for you to have someone else do that for you, so that you, because the return on whatever it is that you invest in doing this in all these different ways, video, social media, website, we're going to talk about in a little bit, like Paige mentioned, in even the language you use and the words you use everywhere in your marketing, like it is going to come back with value to you. It is not a waste. You are not doing it, because some people can't read this. Like there is value in you doing this. And the really cool thing about it too is that you have the opportunity to put yourself in that position to be an empathetic marketer. Like it's not just the title, it's not just the tagline of this podcast of marketing for thinking, feeling humans. You are marketing your business and your nonprofit to very real people in very real circumstances that are experiencing their life in a very different way than you are. It's just the math of it, right? Like, yes, there's people like you, but there's a lot more people that aren't like you that are experiencing life differently. And so by growing the ways that you're being empathetic to others, you are just by nature of going through the process, expanding the opportunities that you have to connect with more people and grow your goals of what, whether that's to make more money with your, small business or to grow your following. Like it's going to happen. It just does work because of who we are as people.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Paige. I was just going to ask, as our copywriter, like official copywriter on the call,
yes.
Do you have any hot takes or soapbox moments just about accessibility in language? And I mean, we can't cover everything. There's a lot. I think that as marketers, we got to be working on educating ourselves. But are there maybe kind of all too common mistakes that you see or that you think about? It's kind of putting you on the spot here.
No, it's good. So this is something that I'm constantly evolving on as a writer. But I think we talked in our first episode when we were deep diving into consent about, thinking about the different lived experiences of people who we want to interact with as businesses in our marketing, and making sure that the tactics we're using to opt them into our marketing materials needs to take into account their different lived experiences. The language that we use in all of our content, and even the pillars that ground our messaging, to be as accessible as possible, we also want to make sure that we take those lived experiences into account as well. There are a lot of ways that commonly used language can be ableist or othering. Here we go. We're 38 minutes in. I'm making my first mention of the Roe v. Wade decision. I saw a post this morning on LinkedIn about, when you talk about this decision affecting women, you're actually using othering and transphobic language. Whether you intend to or not, you're leaving out a whole subset of people, trans men, other queer folks who may biologically be able to get pregnant and give birth, but who don't identify as women. That can be a sort of accessibility challenge because you're making those people feel like they're not being seen. And that can cut out opportunity for you and make you look like a jackass even when you didn't mean to. You know,
Right.
there are so many different ways that we have to think about how we're showing up in our marketing. You know, like there's nothing like the feeling of, you know, showing up and, you know, having a voice about something and then having somebody say like, what you just said is pretty transphobic. Like, what a terrible feeling. And it's just another opportunity to continue expanding our horizons and get better, right? There's an organization that I'm part of everywhere, but here in Chicago, called Showing Up for Racial Justice. And they chose that name for their organization rather than Standing Up for Racial Justice, because even the idea of standing up for something has some ableist undertones. So at the risk of just like bowling people over with wokeness here, you know, I know that's how some people react. Like, oh my God, like another thing we have to think about. Well, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Welcome to a lived experience in 2022 in the world that we participate in. It's easy.
And it makes it
it's easy
it
to
makes
roll your
everything
eyes,
so much
but
richer.
you don't have to.
It makes everyone's experience so much richer. Like, what if we just made one another think a little bit more? So that's all part of accessibility for me. It's, you know, making people feel included with the language that you use. Not using words in your marketing campaigns like, whoa, that's crazy, you know, because that's ableist toward people with mental illness. I personally love substituting wild there.
Well, and you bring up
I don't know. It also feels really good coming out. That's wild.
You bring up a really good point with that, Paige, because I think it's easy to, when you come at this with a certain mindset, it's easy to hear you say something like that and be like, oh gosh.
There she goes
No,
again.
not you, but like, oh gosh, people are offended by that. And like, rather than come at it from a perspective where it's like you get frustrated that people are offended by something, take it as a learning opportunity, as we all should in our lives, to say, oh my gosh, I did not realize that using that language, like that saying crazy is such a, you know, has those under, like, have I experienced that in my own life? Like, have someone come to me and said, hey, I'm really hurt by that? No, but I've heard people like you, Paige, talk about that online and be like, oh my gosh, that's something that I wouldn't have even considered. I'm so glad that someone brought that to my attention, because it's an opportunity to grow. Like, we all should be seeking those opportunities out. So a lot of it really comes down to, like Matt said, it's mindset. It's an intentionality and it's a choice. Like, you're choosing to be more empathetic toward other people. And that just comes from a deflection of self to say, how can I be a better lived person in the community around me, both here, wherever you are in person, or in the increasingly global reach that we have online?
Bonus points if you're thinking more about the language that you use to be more inclusive and accessible. You might come up with some really kick-ass words that help you stand out that much more.
Absolutely.
Like, if you're not resorting to, honestly, like kind of lazy commonplace language that could veer into that ableist or othering territory, great. You could come up with an amazing turn of phrase that nobody else has thought of because you forced yourself to get a little bit more creative.
Well, and I would say, I think there are people out there, other marketers, who maybe are not there personally. Like, they are giving the like another thing I have to think about reaction. And I might make an argument that says, hey, as a professional marketer, like, you have to know this stuff. Like, this is not stuff that you can ignore, because even just from like an effectiveness standpoint, this is the world that you do live in. And if you want to create problems for yourself, you know, continue to be ignorant about this kind of stuff. And so even if you're not 100% there yet, I think you should be getting there and should be educating yourself and be doing it because it's right. But if all you need in this conversation is to hear, like, also you need to do it because it's like the thing you need to do as a marketer.
Absolutely.
I feel like you're going to get left behind if you dig in your heels and say,
going to be stuck back here.
You're not going to be you're not
beyond
understanding
that,
where we are really.
beyond that, whether or not you're willing to accept that that's the reality, and if you are in a place, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, all three of them are harping on this, I feel personally attacked, this is ridiculous. The reality is, regardless of whether you're gonna get left behind or whether society, blah, 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 there's all of that. That's all super important to us on this podcast. We hope it can become important to you. But even if you're not there yet, let me tell you, by embracing some of these things, you will make more money. You will grow your audience. And so purely from a selfish standpoint, which, yes, at this point, we're calling you selfish.
Yeah.
Because it really is about others in today's world. Like, we have to consider other people in our community. If all you want to be is selfish, which we hope you grow out of, but if you're in that place, right now, what we're telling you is going to make things better for you personally. And even if you just go through the motions, start.
Also, there's nothing wrong with making more money.
Absolutely.
I'm not team Jagbag here, but yes, let's make more money. Absolutely. So if that's what drives you,
do these things because you're gonna be
you.
Exactly.
I think a lot of frustration that people maybe who are more conservative than myself have about wokeness in marketing and from corporations. I think you got to realize I can be pretty cynical about the motivations behind these corporations. They're not doing it necessarily because they think it's the right altruistic thing.
No.
It's because they're making money. It's this is their audience. Their audience cares about it. And so even if you don't care about it,
get canceled.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Well,
right.
Okay.
Well, and just one last thought with that. The way that you can tell in marketing is the switch from June 30th to July 1st. And we're about we're 4 days away from that, right?
Pride retirement.
Right? That is what we're talking about here really does need to be something that you live and breathe beyond just Pride Month or beyond Black History Month, or a lot of these different designated months. I saw someone say on Twitter, there are not enough months in the year or days in our lifetime to platform every single marginalized people group that over the days behind us have been marginalized that we're trying to draw attention to. There's just not enough days. And so it's an ongoing process where you need to be thinking about this on a regular basis. It needs to drip into everything you do. And the good news is it's gonna get easier the more you do it. It's like anything else in your business. The more you practice it, if you think back to whatever it is that your business does or your nonprofit does, in the early days when you were just learning about how to do it, stuff took you so much time. And now you're like, oh yeah, I can get that done, no problem.
Yeah.
I think about my first, writing my first brand script and seeing what the new folks are struggling with every day. And I feel like I could write a brand script in my sleep some days now. It becomes a reflex. Right. So get your reps in, fam.
Right. Like anything else, start forming those positive habits.
Yeah. Well, let's
give yourself cookies if you need to.
I need to give myself more cookies. I think that's some really great advice.
I support you.
Let's kind of end and talk about websites. Every company has a website, and this is where I might veer into a little bit of the legal side. I think a lot of conversation
we should absolutely talk a little bit about
has been around legal liability, and this is an area. So I come from a website design background. I have an art degree, and I have always kind of thought of myself as a marketer, as a bit of a designer first. And I'll be honest and say, accessibility from a design standpoint was not on my radar for a very long time. It didn't come up in design school. It didn't seem to be a priority in terms of anyone talking about it on the web. But I do find, especially in the last few years, this has really become a much more recognized issue. And part of it is that there is a legal liability. There are businesses that are getting sued because their websites are not ADA compliant. And, the likelihood of that happening is kind of low, I would say, as of now. But there is
low but growing.
Risk. Low but growing. And I would say this is... okay, this is not, I don't want to be tactical about like you should be choosing to be accessible based on your own risk. But there are certain industries that people with disabilities that are using screen readers and things are interacting with more often. And if your business is in that space, the likelihood, medical organizations, a lot of nonprofits that serve populations of people with disabilities, if you're not thinking about accessibility, there actually is a real risk. And marketers often don't realize that this is even a thing. And so designers who are building websites and designing websites who are not aware of accessibility guidelines and aren't thinking about it could be setting up their clients for a pretty difficult situation. And if your client gets sued because their website is not accessible and you were the one to design it, who do you think they're going to call first? This is not something that they're expecting to be responsible for.
Yeah.
It's something that they're expecting you to be responsible for.
Right.
So,
right.
Matt, didn't you say like the umbrella of organizations that need to have ADA accessible websites or ADA compliant websites it has to do with the number of full-time employees you have, right?
There's two pieces to that guideline. There's Title I. This is I'm not a lawyer. Okay, please don't.
I was going to say this
is
this is the part of the show where we interrupt to say this is our disclaimer. This is not a legal podcast. This is not legal advice.
Yeah,
we're also not doctors.
Right, we're not doctors. So legally, right, you've got Title I and Title III in the accessibility guidelines. One has to do with employees, right? So you have to be ADA compliant as an employer. And so that's the one that refers to the number of employees that you have. And so if your employees are interacting with your website, and you have more than 15 employees, you have to fall under, this is my understanding, the ADA compliance is going to apply to you from an employer standpoint. But if you have less than 15 employees, you still have the public usage, which is, I think, what Title III is. And so it's not that if you have fewer than 15 employees, you can ignore ADA compliance, but there is that 15 employee mark is a kind of specific marker that's going to put you at higher risk. And I was just meeting with a client the other day, and we were talking about how their website, from a color contrast ratio, they had this really nice design, but the colors, it was this tan button with white text, and it's unreadable for people with a certain level color blindness and low I don't know what the low visibility,
right.
And they were they did a quick Google search. One of the guys in the meeting was like, oh wow, this applies to us. We never thought that this was important, and a lot of businesses don't realize that that this is an important thing that they need to be thinking about.
Right.
If you want to know, hey, does my business fall under this? I just found a pretty straightforward article on Business News Daily that we'll link in the show notes if you want to take a look at what it means to have an accessible website. You can go down a deep rabbit hole on this stuff, and there are actually businesses that specialize in ADA compliance for websites. Matt, I know you worked with someone when we were working on the rise.org website together.
Yeah, there's sort of three ways you can approach accessibility on a website. So baseline, this is the cover your ass version, is I've seen websites, and this is not one I would recommend, but I've seen websites that basically put a statement on an accessibility statement that says, we're trying to be accessible, but we know we're not. This is my interpretation of it. But basically it's we're aware of accessibility guidelines, please don't sue us. But they're essentially saying we're not really going to do anything about it, but we're aware, and this is our cover your ass sort of version. The second one is there are plugins and software that you can add to your website that brings you up to a certain level of compliance. And this isn't ideal, but it is a step forward. And the problem with accessibility in websites is there are some guidelines, but the people that use tools to help them, like screen readers, there's no consistency across the internet on how coders code websites. And so the tools have like found ways to do the best that they can with what they're experiencing. But it also means that you as a coder, there's no set of standards that like you have to or should apply in every case. There are examples of like, what if you use all caps in your titles? Like screen readers sometimes read those out, individual letters, but not all screen readers in all cases do that because there's not a consistency in terms of the way it gets applied. But you can use a plugin. Accessibility is a software, and I've talked with their sales team. We use it. We're implementing that right now on one of our client sites. That gets you pretty good. It does address some of the underlying issues that a lot of websites experience and make it easier for screen readers. The third way that you could, and this is probably the best, but is very expensive, to be honest, is when you work with an ADA consultant who's going to audit your site, and they're going to give you a punch list of these are the things that need to be addressed. And so we've worked with a guy here in the Twin Cities who does some of that work. He mostly does like speaking and consulting at this point. His name's Joe Dolson. We should put a link for him as well. Look at it. This is dark social, by the way, guys. When we mention people on our podcast, Joe's analytics are not tracking him. That's my callback to previous episodes.
Circling back.
And now let's take it a step further and say by having a transcription of captions for this episode, if you put that on your website, then he can know that we've mentioned him because it can be picked up.
Do a search. When I think about website design compliance, the big thing that you need to think about, like the easy, quote unquote easy thing to think about, is the colors that you're using. There's some good checkers out there that you can use. They can scan your website. They can tell you this is what you need to change. For designers out there, you just got to know you can never use white text on an orange background. Like no matter how like strong it is, it never passes that compliance check. And there's a few other color combinations that tend to show
red
pretty
red
often.
on video is a great example of that. You can't use red because particularly projectors, but TVs do this also. Like if you've ever seen red text on a video, it makes it really hard to read. For whatever reason, the technology that presents that image, that processes that image for us, doesn't read it well. And so that's another thing you got to watch out for.
So the color contrast is a big thing. We talked about image alt tags and descriptions. That's something that you should be doing as well. One of the areas that I think is really interesting is there's kind of a debate. So for those of you who are SEO marketers, right, from an accessibility standpoint, the H tags that you use is a way to organize information in terms of importance. And for designers and SEO people, a lot of times we play pretty fast and loose with those H tags because we're just thinking about it from a visibility, like a design standpoint, not an important standpoint. And so like a heading is supposed to kind of give you like, this is the big category we're talking about. And then you go to an H2 and it's like the next category. And so an H3 should be inside of an H2 tag because they're thinking about it as like content organization. And when we write, an example is when we write a really catchy headline, it's copy, right? Like it's part of the text. It doesn't like set aside, this is a section. That should be typically in like a paragraph tag, not in an H tag on a website.
Right.
Just really big.
And that's what we'll do too from a design standpoint is you'll say, oh, I want this text bigger, so I'll use an H1 tag. And because whatever you're building that website in by default is going to configure it again because of like how we view the importance of of the text. It's going to make an H1 tag be larger just by default. Instead, what you should be doing is thinking about this, like what Matt's talking about, where what is the actual level of importance and how does it fit into the structure of your copy, and then choose the appropriate H tag, and then go that extra step and say, yes, this is an H3, but on this page for design, I want it to be larger. And you've got to go in and set some custom CSS or HTML to tell the render of it, make this larger. But don't use an H1 just because you want the text bigger.
Yeah, and this is another argument for having a really good relationship if you're a copywriter, say, with your designer or a developer, so that someone should have a really good working knowledge of, hey, this is important visibly, but on the back end, either for SEO, for accessibility, like that's not the thing. So being able to have that conversation about design hierarchy versus on-page SEO hierarchy, two completely
and there
different
is a
things.
conflict though too between what an SEO person says is most important and what actually makes sense from like a content organization. And that's another one of those areas where sometimes you have to make a choice. And with rise.org, that site, they made a choice that they wanted to prioritize accessibility over like SEO best practices, because SEO often wants to like do, it's not keyword stuffing exactly, but they want to get keywords into those title tags that maybe don't make sense in the information hierarchy. And so you're going to have to make that decision.
Right.
I mean, ultimately, I would like us to move in a direction where that accessibility piece takes more priority. And I do think that Google is somewhat aware of these things as well, where that's the direction I would see things going from a technology standpoint. But there is a bit of a conflict right now between sometimes what are your most effective marketing practices versus what are the right ones from accessibility or for other reasons. So.
Right. And if we even take a step back from that compliance aspect, which is, it really is important. And like we've already said, even if you don't feel like this is important, we're telling you now, this is something you do need to be thinking about for a lot of different reasons. So this is not like to shame you, but this is hey, if you haven't been thinking about this, start, because it really is important. If we take a step back from that, just from purely a legal standpoint and a risk standpoint and a compliance standpoint, there's also just the way, again, going back to actual humans and being empathetic toward how people are engaging with your content. It's important to even look at like on a desktop screen, which remember, there's a lot of different sizes. And so you got to be mindful of that, of how your information's presented. I know that for me, it's easy to like be designing a website and get lost in it looks great on my giant monitor. Not everybody has that giant monitor. Someone might have a smaller laptop. I've got to consider how my images and how my copy appears to someone on a different size screen. And then even going to the responsive side of things and thinking about how the layout and the structure of your site appears on mobile. Sometimes you've got, like, we had an issue on our site where we've got an image and then text on the right. And then the next is the image on the right and the text on the left. And then one more time, image on the left, text on the right as a third row. And that looks fine on desktop. But then when that all stacks into the mobile, then it starts to look really quirky. And so we had to like take some steps to make sure in the code that on mobile, this appears the way we expect it to, just because purely by thinking about design and infrastructure of your site, how that appears to people. So compliance is super important, and just allowing humans to engage with it the way you expect them to across the variety of different devices is also super important.
And David, I think your point there about, making sure that your image stacking on mobile doesn't look wonky. Like, accessibility isn't just for people with disabilities. Like, it's for
all of
people's
us.
General pleasure in experiencing your content. Like, just taking that little extra bit of time. Like, I'm working on a website design right now where there are a lot of sort of custom features, and we're overlaying images on shapes, and it gets a little wibbly as you start to reduce the breakpoints. And like, it's kind of a mess, but like, I want it to look good for everybody who sees this, not just people who are, staring at things, like you said, from my big ass monitor. So yeah, it's a great point. And there are a lot of things to think about.
There's some like easy takeaways. If you're a video person, you should be really thinking about captions and language. I think like start there. That's if there was a topic we covered, that was that. If you're a copywriter, you really need to think about like what kind of language you're using and maybe evaluate the inclusivity of the words that you're choosing. And I'll say if you're a designer, you really need to be aware of what the like compliance guidelines are from a web standard point of view. And those are like really easy places to start. And it is just a start. That's where you can go very deep, and we should always be trying to improve in whatever area we're focusing on.
Yep.
David, what can you not stop thinking about right now?
I can't stop thinking about a really cool opportunity that I just learned about recently from an organization called World Relief. They have just with everything going on in the world right now, there are more people globally having to flee their homes for a variety of reasons than ever before. It's unfortunately a growing need in the world. And so those refugees need to go somewhere. And there is, to an extent, an infrastructure that has been built over the decades of how different countries like the United States handle processing those refugees and allowing them to resettle and helping them find, providing them with services and helping them get their legs under them, or helping them get established, we'll say, thinking about this from an ableist standpoint, not saying get their legs under them, but being able to be rooted where they now are. One of the things that World Relief provides is a really cool program called the Host Home program. And you, as someone who owns a home, might have the opportunity, you do have the opportunity to, if you so choose, provide a space in your home for a family or an individual that needs a place temporarily to stay with you. And so my wife and I have started to just inquire about this possibility of, we have a little guest suite that's attached to our house that has a separate entrance with a bathroom. It's fabulous. We've spent the last 6 months making it a really cool space. Like, I basically said, if this was a hotel room that I was going to stay in, what would I want it to have? And we've just built it from that standpoint you can take a space in your home, and you don't have to go to the lengths that we did, but like, you can make a space in your home available to a family or an individual that needs it for a week, 2 weeks, a month, a couple of months. It's really up to you. World Relief makes it really easy to just allow someone a space to like land while they work on getting established wherever they are. And so if that sounds like something that you'd be interested in, I'd really encourage you to explore it. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes, because, not only are you providing someone a place that's safe and can be a peaceful place for them in whatever they've encountered, but it's an opportunity for you too. Like, in the last couple of years, as we've worked with and encountered more refugee families and immigrant families to the United States, man, it has resulted in some of the most awesome, intense, connected, happy friendships and moments of our lives to do that. Like, don't be afraid of that. Like, it's an like built in, again, like this whole conversation, there's not just benefits to your audience. Like, there's a benefit to you too in this. So World Relief's Host Home program, really cool. That's what I can't stop thinking about.
Paige, what about you? Other than, well, there's some things.
Yeah, there are
that
several things I can't stop
these
thinking
days.
about. With that said, I'll go a little bit lighter. I was up in Wisconsin over the weekend, and as I was driving from the house up to grab a drink with my husband, I saw an all black billboard with white text that just said, "Surely not everyone was kung fu fighting." And it just took me all the way out. I don't know if it was advertising something or if somebody just said, "What the hell? I've got a few $100s. I think I'm going to put this billboard up." But on a fairly cloudy weekend for me, it really offered a bright spot, and I kind of can't stop thinking about it. So now you are too. What about you, Matt?
Well, I mean, the top. For those of you listening later, we're talking on Monday, June 27th, so it's right after the Roe v. Wade decision, and just thinking about, this is not my real one. The one I can't stop thinking about is how is just on social media, like how awful it is when we're trying to discuss anything of importance, like the inability to actually have real conversations. And so I do appreciate.
What, you want nuance or something?
Yeah, I mean,
okay,
unrealistic. But no, the thing I have been thinking about is one of my favorite shows from last year was on HBO. It was called Station 11. If you've not watched it, it was great. I listened to a podcast this week about the show creator, and they started creating this show, which is about a world where most of the population dies in a pandemic. but they started creating it before.
I think it's really cool of them to do a documentary.
Yeah. It's based on a book as well. It was before the pandemic started. But
It's by Emily St. John Mandel is the name of the author. She's fabulous. I recommend all of her books.
I mean, it was a great show, and just hearing the conversation about it again made me just remember the guy the showrunner was also involved in The Leftovers, which was one of my favorite shows. It's a little bit dark, but it's really about like what does it take to like create connection after, most post-apocalyptic shows are about how awful it gets, and this one is really kind of about how connection with other people is the way, like it's not just a nice bonus, but it's actually like necessary for creating a society that works. And anyway, it's a great show. I totally recommend it if you've not watched it. It might be a little too close to home for some people, based on.
I actually couldn't finish it. It was too much for me right now, but I know after hopefully we get some distance from this hot mess express we're on. I've heard it's just phenomenal. So
I think it is. So well, let's. I think we should leave it there. I'm Matt Banker.
I'm Paige Worthy.
And I'm David Hepburn. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Hello First Name Podcast, a podcast for thinking, feeling humans. We'll see you next time.